Yes, Your Honor. Defendants call Mr. Nick Denton.
If you would step this way, watch your step, have a seat, and speak in a loud and clear voice for the court. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Denton.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your full name for the court?
It's Nicholas Guido Anthony Denton.
All right. Mr. Denton, where were you educated?
I went to school in North London at University College School, and so I went to University College School in North London, and then went to Oxford University, also in England.
Okay. And Oxford University, that was where, at least in this country, we would call college?
That's right.
Okay. All right. And when did you graduate from Oxford?
Yes, I graduated in 1988.
Okay. And what was your field of study?
I studied politics, philosophy, and economics.
Okay. And upon graduation, did you become a journalist?
I worked for a book publisher for The Economist Books, which was a department of The Economist magazine, and then later became a journalist. It was probably about a year after graduating college. Became a journalist in Eastern Europe.
Okay. Now, what was your very first job after graduation?
So at The Economist Books, I was editing guides to business and business culture in different countries. So it would be things like, if you're in Japan, you should hold the business card like this, so as not to offend people when you hand over your business card. So it was articles of that nature.
Okay. And then after that, you indicated you worked where?
Well, I was in Budapest and Bucharest. So this was 1989. This was during the changes in Eastern Europe as Soviet control was slipping. And Hungary was one of the first places to transition from communism.
All right. Now, when you were in Budapest, who were you employed by?
I wrote for a variety of newspapers initially, both in Budapest and in neighboring Romania, in Bucharest, the capital there, until I got a full-time job at the Financial Times.
All right. When you said, if you could explain to folks, when you said you worked for a variety of publications, how does that work? Were you a stringer?
Yeah, I was a freelance writer, a stringer. I wrote for the Times of London, the Scotsman, the Daily Telegraph in Bucharest during the revolution there, and then I think to my parents' satisfaction, I got a job at the Financial Times.
Okay, all right. So when you got a job at the Financial Times, about what year was that?
That would have been January 1990.
Okay.
So pretty much as everything was changing in Eastern Europe. And that was based in Budapest. I was the Budapest correspondent. I did some traveling in the region to Ukraine, Moldavia, Romania, but mainly I was based in Budapest and covering Hungary, both the political transition and also the economic transition as Western businesses came in and as the communist economic regime crumbled.
Okay. So did you cover the fall of communism, at least in that part of the Eastern Bloc?
Yes, in Hungary and Romania I did. Hungary was, as I said, a peaceful transition. Romania was rather bloodier.
Okay. And did you cover that Romanian revolution as well?
For the Telegraph and also for the Financial Times, yes.
Okay. All right. How long did you work from Budapest?
I was in Budapest through till 1994 for the Financial Times. I also did some writing for The Economist magazine.
Okay.
But it's part of the same group, and I did less for them.
All right. So up until 1994. In 1994, what did you do at that point?
In 1994, I really enjoyed Budapest, but in order for me to progress in my career, I had to go back to head office. And head office was in London, so I went back to the London office of the Financial Times and covered banking, M&A deals, financial scandals, banking, the banking industry generally. It was a time when American investment banks were coming to London, and so that was a big topic at the time.
All right. Did you continue to work for The Economist, or did you focus your energies strictly on the Financial Times?
No, at this time I was a staff writer for the Financial Times, and I had to be exclusive to them. I think I could do a little bit of writing for other publications, but it was more than a full-time job. I did take up some time to write a book with a colleague, following on from one of the stories that we covered about the collapse of a big British merchant bank in one of those scandals. But apart from that, I worked full-time for the Financial Times.
Okay. Did you have an assigned beat?
As I said, I covered M&A deals, so that's two big companies. There was two big pharmaceutical companies in Switzerland got together to form what is now Novartis, and my specialty was talking to investment bankers, listening to the word on the street, being a bit of a switchboard for information, and the goal of that was to try to get news of the deal before, say, the Wall Street Journal, which was our main competitor, or the Times, or other newspapers. So deals were my specialty, and then when one of those banks would get into trouble, as this British merchant bank Barings did, they lost $1 billion because of a rogue trader who'd made some bad bets, and then some fictitious bets to cover up the bad bets. So I covered those stories when they came up.
All right. Now, did you like that kind of reporting?
It was exciting. It was an exciting time. It was a great beat. You felt like you were at the center of the action. Yeah, I did find newspapers a little restrictive, because I mean, this is a story I tell a lot, and maybe the jury hasn't heard it, but most of my colleagues have heard it way too many times. That if you work for a newspaper, you know the sort of version of a story that shows up in the newspaper the next day. If you're actually working on a beat, look, it's accurate. Most newspapers make a very good effort to be accurate, but usually there are a lot of things missing. There are deals being done behind the scenes. There are facts that are being left out. There are publicists who are pulling strings, and the version of a story that two journalists might tell each other over a drink at the bar, it's often more interesting and often gets to deeper truths. And that was the kind of journalism that I was ultimately more interested in. You can call it gossipy. I just like to call it truths. Reading between the lines, working out what's really going on. And when a journalist actually asks the question to another journalist, so yeah, I've seen the story, but tell me what really happened. That's the question that we sought to answer later when I founded Gawker.
All right. But continuing on chronological development,
Okay.
How long did you work for the Financial Times in London?
In London through till 1997, and then I continued 1 year longer in the States.
Okay. So you say you continued through, what, 1997?
I finished working for the Financial Times after 8 years there.
Okay.
So I finished in, I think it was the summer of 1998, when I was based in San Francisco.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask. I take it your focus when you were at the Financial Times in London, as you've been explaining to us, was this business focus, mergers and acquisitions, banking, those kind of things. In 1997, you transition, you come to the United States, and you go where?
Well, in '96, I was always a geek. I was a technology obsessive. I actually used to, when I was in Budapest, I used to get the train to Vienna to pick up Wired magazine because I was kind of obsessed about technology. So from about 1996, I was writing about the internet and technology. And then I lobbied to be based in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, in order to be closer to the center of the action there.
Okay. So that was your choice to kind of shift your focus at this point in your career and come to San Francisco.
Yes, that's right.
And you were able to report on technology as you had wished?
I did, yes.
Okay. All right. Now, how long did you work reporting on technology for the Financial Times?
Not too long. I started in '96 and finished in 1998. I got. It was an exciting time in Silicon Valley. This was during the first phase of the internet. The early signs of the internet boom. Netscape had launched. There were browsers. There were search engines being formed and directories, and you could tell, or at least I felt I could tell, that it was the future. It was going to be the future of media. It's going to be the future of retail. It was probably going to be the future of everything.
All right. Certainly that was your feeling at the time, I take it.
Yes, it was.
Okay. Now, at some point, did you move from reporting, being a reporter, that part of journalism, did you move over to the publishing side?
I did. I was covering internet media companies, and eventually I decided, hey, it looks more fun on the other side of the fence. So these people are smart, but they're not so smart that one couldn't compete. So I felt that it would be more interesting to become a businessman and to launch a business which tapped both my business, my understanding of the sector of technology, but also my media experience. So in 2002, we launched what was then called, it was a blog, a web blog. It was a new form of internet media, and we launched our first title called Gizmodo.
Okay. And Gizmodo, could you explain to folks what Gizmodo focused on?
Well, I mentioned Wired Magazine, which Wired Magazine had a section which was all about gadgets. And being a print publication, it had a long lead time. So from the point at which news came out to when it appeared in the magazine, it was often a month and a half or 2 months. And this news was coming out in a more, it was coming out immediately, and here was this new medium which would allow you to get reviews, information, behind the scenes information out to a large number of people straight away. And it seemed to me that there was potential. There was no money in it initially, but I could see that down the line people would be interested in this, and where there was an audience, then money would follow at least sufficiently to keep a business afloat.
All right. You said you thought money would follow and you'd be able to stay in business? Mm-hmm. Did that indeed prove to be the case?
It took a long while. Initially, we paid our writers. I paid the writer of Gizmodo, I think he was paid $2,000 a month. I paid him out of my own pocket, and I felt that I'd made a bit of money in the dot-com boom before the collapse of the market. And I felt, look, sooner or later, advertising will come back, and if I work on Gizmodo and work with Pete Rojas, the writer of Gizmodo, for long enough, I can afford to keep it going for a few years, and hopefully by that time there'll be some advertising and we could cover our costs.
All right. And based on what we've heard thus far, I take it Gizmodo is indeed still in business.
Oh, yeah, Gizmodo is our commercial flagship site. It has about 30 of our, it's our commercial flagship. So about 30 of our 100 writers are employed on Gizmodo. It was our first site, and to some extent it's still one of my favorites.
All right. Now, did you establish another online website after Gizmodo?
I did.
Okay.
I was based in New York at this point. I'd been shuttling around between San Francisco and London and New York, and I decided to settle in New York. And I launched a site called Gawker, which was focused on New York and New York media and culture in particular.
Okay. When you launched Gawker, did you have a particular vision in mind for that site?
This goes back to how I felt when I worked at newspapers, that often just because of the way that the news is processed and because of all the hidden hands behind the news, that the real story often doesn't get out. So the idea of Gawker was that we could cover the media. You know, the media, there are people who cover the media. The media, it holds other people to account, but it's rarely held to account itself. And we weren't trying to be too judgy, but we were trying to provide that service that a journalist might provide another journalist of explaining what's really going on here, who's friends with whom, what's not being said, what's being said for reasons and for motives that may not be clear. And we've always talked about it as being an attempt to show the story behind the story for people for whom you can consume a lot of TV, consume a lot of newspapers, and you can still often not have much idea of what's really going on.
All right. Now, so you launched Gawker. Initially, did Gawker focus on the New York media?
Yes, it did. I mean, a lot of the media is in New York,
Sure.
so by extension, we covered most of the media. But it was, I think, yeah, it was very much New York centered.
Okay. Now, as Gawker grew, did your vision change? Did you go beyond just New York and begin to expand the focus of the publication?
It did become more and more a national publication, particularly later on that decade. You know, probably around, I'd say, by about 2008, it had expanded in staff, expanded in scope. But the essential point of it, to show the story behind the story, to cover the media and to cover news by covering the media and how the media was covering the news, was still at the heart both of Gawker and actually of our other properties. There was one, if I can give one example,
Sure.
or am I going to slow things down too much?
Sure.
The one kind of classic example which illustrates the sort of thing that we do is that at Jezebel, women's issue site, launched with a story just showing how magazine covers were manipulated. I think we got a hold of an unretouched photograph of a country singer who was on the front cover of Red Book magazine. It was a perfectly attractive picture of her unretouched. But we showed the contrast between that and what had actually been published on the front of Red Book magazine. You know, her arms had been slimmed down, her shoulders, her hair had been filled out. And we were just making the point that what you see in the media is not necessarily what people really look like. The stories that you read are not necessarily what's really going on.
All right. And what would you describe, if you were going to explain to people, what would you describe as Gawker's mission as it sees it today?
I think that's still very much at the heart of it. Gawker.com, you're talking
Yes,
about?
sir. Yes.
We focused, because of the 2016 election campaign is such a huge topic. Gawker.com focuses pretty strongly on that at the moment. But the general idea is to peel back the surface, show what's going on behind the scenes.
Okay. So it is still your desire, it is still your mission to tell the story behind the story, okay, and to try to provide folks with information beyond what may just appear in the mainstream media.
That's right. The tagline of Gawker.com right now is today's gossip is tomorrow's news. That often the information that's being passed around within the elites amongst journalists is, people can call it gossip, but that's what often ends up in the headlines a day later, or a week later, or 10 years later. And I felt that, particularly in an internet era where everybody can get access to information, that the public had more of a right to know what was going on, and we were in a good position to satisfy that demand.
All right. All right. Now, talked a little bit about the background of your publishing entity, the Gawker family. Let us move our focus to October of 2012, which is the time that the publication here at issue, the post went up on the site. In October of 2012, what was your position in the company?
I always call myself publisher. I think my formal title was president of the company.
Okay. In 2012, how many sites did Gawker Media have altogether?
At the time, we had 8 properties.
Okay.
So we had Gawker and Gizmodo, and then other properties covering topics like cars, video games, sports, etc.
Okay. So, just so we're all on the same page, when you say properties and I said sites,
Yeah,
that's the same thing, right?
it's basically the same thing, yes.
Okay. All right. And those were the ones that we saw early on. You were here with us for the opening.
Mhm.
We had Deadspin, you mentioned Jezebel, all of those individual.
And then the ones with funny names like Kotaku and Jalopnik and Ionine, which I don't expect anybody to be able to pronounce properly.
Okay. All right. Now, if we focus on that whole family of these various sites, all told, how many posts on average, I mean, I realize it varies day to day, but just in a normal day, an average day, roughly how many posts are we talking about being published per day?
Well, across the entire life of the company, we've published nearly 1 million posts on all the sites. So, what's that, 100,000 or so a year, so 2,000 a week. That would be the average over the long term.
All right. So from the start, we're talking about 1 million posts?
I think it's 960,000 is the current count.
Okay, all right. How many staff members did you have back in October of 2012?
I think we had around 120, pretty much evenly split between editorial and the business side, which includes advertising sales, technology, and operations.
Okay. So then, if my math, and you got to be careful here,
Yeah.
if my math is correct, then we're talking about 60 writers?
60 writers, yes.
Okay.
Writers and editors.
Fair enough. Gotcha. Now, at this time, you served as the publisher.
I did.
Okay.
There was 1 year where I was editor of, well, I think about 8 months, where I was editor of Gawker.com in between 2 tenures there.
Okay.
But other than that, I've been publisher and president.
All right. So for that period, you were not only publisher, but you also sat in the editor's chair, right?
In 2008, yes.
Yeah, much before these events. Okay. Let's talk, focused on October, that fall 2012 period. If you could explain to the folks what your main responsibilities were as publisher.
So I was overseeing the 3 business departments, technology, advertising sales, and operations. I would determine the leadership of those departments and the strategy. At this time, I was spending a lot of time on the technology side, trying to improve our reader comments and the interaction between writers. We were trying to make for a better quality. You know how most news sites have got rather abusive or trollish comments at the bottom of articles. Ours are much better, and that's as a result of a lot of the work that we did. On the editorial side, I had reporting to me the 8 editors-in-chief of the 8 sites that we had at the time.
All right. When you said you were working on the software for the comment site, who would you work with on that?
With our Chief Technology Officer, Tom Plunkett.
Okay. So you're working with the technology types. You indicated you worked with the editors. They reported to you?
Yes, the 8 editors-in-chief reported to me. I would appoint them, if absolutely necessary, part company with them. I would set goals and strategy, And I said the ethos of the company came from my idea that we should make an effort to be honest in our journalism and to show the story behind the story. Basically not to play the game that a lot of media outlets do.
All right. Did you also, were you the fellow that was responsible for hiring and firing?
Yes.
Okay. Did you set compensation for the employees?
I would determine the compensation certainly of the editors-in-chief, their salary levels, and I would, after consultation, I would come up with the bonus schemes. So the bonus arrangements or formulae by which we determine the incentive system for the individual writers or the sites on which they worked.
All right. I'm losing my voice here. How would you describe your management style?
I delegate a lot. I had a broad range of responsibilities. And we were a small enough company, but still, it was a stretch. I believed that people would perform better if given clear goals, and not too many of them. So a simple ethos, a simple goal for a numerical goal, performance goal for them to achieve, and then that they should be largely left to get on with the job. I think that was, you get the best performance out of people if you do it that way.
All right. Was your judgment largely borne out?
Sorry? Was
your judgment largely borne out that you get the best performance out of people if you give them some leeway to make decisions?
And I think a lot of people saw us as a pioneer in online media, not just because we were early, but because of some of the systems that we put in place. And people were fascinated by our use of statistics and web analytics as a way to measure performance. It's not like that's entirely new in media. People have always measured circulation or ratings, circulation in newspapers or ratings in TV. But here we had a way to measure performance in real time and at a more granular level, in more detail than media organizations had been able to in the past. And we made full use of that.
All right. How do you measure success as an online publisher?
I think there's two things. Reputation, which is tied to long-term audience growth. So if a successful site with a good brand and a good reputation, which gets others writing about it, recognizing that it's growing in its audience appeal, that is usually correlated with, and that's a successful property.
All right. And I take it, you were saying before, that yes, indeed, this is a new age or a new era, this online publishing, but that readers, number of readers, number of viewers, in the old days, newspaper folks paid attention to their circulation, right?
Yes. When I was at the Financial Times, obviously they paid attention to the circulation. I was also measured by the number of articles that I would put out in any particular year. Here was a way to measure not just raw output, but to measure how writers were connecting with readers. So measure actually much more precisely how well they were serving the constituency that they were there to serve. We have always been extremely reader-focused, and our view has always been that if you satisfy the readers, and you do so consistently, and then your chances of long-term success are maximized.
All right. Now, we've heard here over the last week about how online publishers measure traffic. You were sitting with us throughout that. Now, so traffic in the modern age, I take it, equates with newspaper circulation, equates with ratings at a television station, same kind of thing.
Same kind of thing.
Okay. Now, were you at Gawker one of the kind of early people to focus on this traffic as a measure of readership or audience satisfaction?
Yes, I mean, it's since become pretty widespread. So we have this, it's come up in various conversations in this court over the last few days, but we have this thing called the Big Board, which is a live ranking of exactly which stories have exactly how many readers at any moment in time. So it actually changes. You can see the headlines moving up the charts and moving down the charts in real time. And we were early to adopt that, but I think it's now that same system is used by 40 of the top 50 news publishers.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about how, if you could explain how Gawker Media measures audience share. How do you go about that?
So I can go historical, or I can talk about the time, 2012.
Yeah. Let's, in this instance, let's make this all make sense and fit in context. Let's go back to where you first began and how you measured audience share, and then how that evolved over time. If you could just explain to folks so that they have some appreciation for how this has grown and evolved.
Okay, I'll try to keep it simple because
Sure.
one can get very lost on this subject. Initially, the only measure that was available was a measure called page views. So the number of pages viewed by the aggregate of an audience. And that was a useful measure. Writers spontaneously used it to track their own performance and to see how well their stories were doing. It had some unintended effects. So for instance, web slideshows, where you're kind of clicking through a whole series of images. So that would, each one of those would count as a page view. And so as a performance metric, it wasn't really very good because you'd end up paying in bonus money for activity that wasn't really giving the readers any particular satisfaction. And so we switched to a measure called, which we've heard a lot about, called unique visitors. And that's actually closer to a measure of readership or circulation or ratings of a TV show.
All right. And focusing specifically on 2012, which of those metrics were you using at that point in time?
We were using the US unique visitor ratio, not global.
Okay.
Sorry, not global, not international.
All right. Now, you've told us about these traffic metrics that you used. Do you tie compensation to these traffic metrics?
A portion of compensation, yes.
Okay.
So,
how about salaries? Does your salary, does a reporter's salary depend on these traffic metrics?
no, it doesn't.
Okay, not at all.
I mean, I think occasionally we would say to a writer, if you hit this number, then let's come back and review your salary. But I don't think you can see a particularly close correlation between salaries and traffic.
All right. How about bonuses?
And actually, often the best paid people were editors who didn't really have any traffic themselves at all.
Okay. All right. How about bonuses? Are bonuses tied to traffic?
Yes. At this time, up to a team, an editorial team on a particular site, could receive up to 20% of their collective salaries in the form of a bonus, which was tied to reader satisfaction as measured by unique visitors.
Okay. You mentioned, you were telling us before about the slideshow. Did you used to pay by page views bonuses?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And were you kind of dissatisfied with the incentive that created?
Yeah, we had a problem with with Jalopnik, which is our auto enthusiast site. So we had an editor there who was particularly fond of running slideshows, and in a way he gamed into the system, and we lost money on that.
Okay. Now, you indicated the current system. Have you tried any other forms of incentives in the bonus system?
We try to, because we could actually track exactly how many individual readers, not just a whole editorial team, on a site like Kotaku was reaching, but we could actually track how many readers each individual writer was connecting with. And so we did for a period have an incentive system based on that, but that we found was bad for team morale. So it's a little bit like if, in any kind of sales organization, if the incentives for each individual seller are too, if it's too much based on the individual target, you can get everybody kind of competing with each other and the team morale breaks down. So by the time of 2012, we had people in a team being judged as a collective. So some would be doing stories that would, cat videos that would be popular on the internet, and some would do stories like AJ ran a 40-part series on the pain of unemployment, the depression, drug addiction, broken relationships, lost friendships, just the heartbreak of unemployment in 2012. It didn't garner all that much attention, but it was, I think, good for the overall brand of the property. I think good for our business in the longer term.
All right. So when you said, did you say it was a 40-part series?
Yes, it was. I actually remember being, I was like, does it really have to be 40 parts? But it was an excellent series, and I think it fulfilled part of one of the essential purposes of the internet, which is to allow people, even if anonymously, to be themselves, to share their experiences, and to connect with others who are like them. And I think a lot of people found it, very helpful. It was a subject that hadn't really been covered that much in the mainstream media. This was before income inequality became a big topic.
All right. Now, I'm going to ask you to take a look at one of the exhibits that was displayed last week. Tim, if you could please display Plaintiff's Exhibit 81. Mr. Denton, can you see that okay on your screen there?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Now, the plaintiff has displayed this, or portions of this article, a couple times previously, and I'd like to talk with you about it. First, can you tell folks what this is? What is this article?
So this is an internal memo. I should note that we're an open organization, and almost all of our internal memos are published externally, usually within minutes of being sent around to staff. So this is an article based on a leaked internal memo that talks about a change in the bonus system from, I presume, page views at this point to unique visitors.
All right. So you're telling us this is an article that was published online, and it discussed or reported on one of your internal memos.
Yes,
Yeah.
it happened all the time.
Okay. All right. Now, this memo, was it sent to the whole company? Was it focused on the editorial side?
This would have been sent to the editorial staff.
Okay. And it provides people with information on what you were just telling us all about, this switch from providing bonuses on page views to uniques.
It provides information. It shows people how their site is doing. It shows how other sites in the company are doing. And then there's some encouragement congratulations to people for the stories that the good stories that they've done, and encouragement for them to do more of them.
All right. Now, let me ask you this before we get into the interstices of the memo. Why are exclusives important in your business?
That's being original in either your thought, your ideas, or your information. It's the heart of media. if all you're doing is just repeating, rehashing what other people have already said, there's no real value provided by that.
Okay. It's kind of the whole point of the news business.
Yes.
Right?
I mean, it's supposed to be new.
Right. Tell a new
A
story.
new idea, a new story, a new product, whatever it is.
Okay. All right. Now, if you look at the text of the memo that is reported in this article, you'll see a quote there that says, "We all know that some page views are worth more than others," writes Gawker Media honcho Nick Denton today in an internal memo. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
And then it continues. Think of an exclusive such as Gawker's embassy hazing pics. Do you see that?
Yeah, I think that was, what was those? It was government contractors in Afghanistan who were, we received a tip and we received pictures that they were behaving in a way that was entirely reprehensible. And we published that story. And I think that was a kind of good example of a story that not only attracted a lot of reader attention, but got a lot of pickup elsewhere and was to our credit.
All right. And then the second one, if we continue reading on, you see it says, Deadspin's expose of ESPN's horndoggery. Do you see that?
Yeah, I do.
What was an expose of ESPN's horndoggery?
I can't remember the specifics of this one, but Deadspin was set up as a sort of counterpoint to ESPN. So get the authorized sports news at ESPN, and then if you actually want to find out what's really going on, you go to Deadspin. In fact, I think the name Deadspin actually has various of the letters from ESPN, sort of various of those letters rearranged and with a bit added in. And one of the roles of Deadspin was to basically watch ESPN, follow what was going on internally within ESPN, and then report to our readers, to people who are curious about sports and sports media and how the system worked, how the sausage was made, to report on that. I think this was bad behavior by various ESPN executives.
All right. And then the next one we come to is Gizmodo's first look of the new Microsoft tablet, or IO9's Avatar review. Do you see that?
That's right.
Okay. So what was the story, the Gizmodo piece on the tablet?
And the Microsoft tablet story, this was about the Korea tablet, which was a sort of hybrid tablet / computer. And some early information about a late prototype leaked out, actually through one of Microsoft's ad agencies. And it came to us, and we did an early review, not part of the review system, which is often a little corrupt, but giving our readers an early sight into this new Microsoft tablet. And then the Avatar that's a reference. IO9 is our science fiction site. I'm a bit of a science fiction fan, which might explain why we launched that particular property. And Avatar was the Cameron movie. I think we did a particularly good review of the Cameron movie.
All right. Let me ask you something. Any of these exclusives that you point to on the first page of your memo, which gets picked up and put on the first page of this article, do any of those stories have anything to do with celebrity sex?
The ESPN story had something to do with sex, I think, but no celebrity sex.
Right. To put a finer point on it, I take it had nothing to do with celebrity sex tapes, right?
No.
Okay. Now, the memo, for its part, goes on to explain how the bonus system works, and the publication picks up that and reports it to their readers, right? And if we continue on, the plaintiff then is pointed to the part there. If you could, Tim, if you could scroll on down the document.
Could I get a little water while I'm...
Oh, absolutely. Your Honor, may
Thanks.
I get a... last week, okay, Tim, if you could go further down, it's the page that ends, Happy New Year, Nick. So further down. Continuing on. There we go. There we go. Okay. You'll see in that first paragraph at the top of the page, the last sentence in the paragraph says, most of the stories that resonate are also stories with high page views, with the flames that everyone so praises. Now,
Prizes.
Prizes. Thank you. And then it continues on, and you see there at the bottom, the last sentence says, it just means you have to be even more original, even more provocative, or even more of a hustler than usual. Do you see that?
I did.
Okay. Could you explain to folks what you meant by those passages that we were looking at last week?
So what I meant was that, well, first of all, that page views and unique visitors are not that far apart. They're correlated. Apart from slideshows and some other devices like that, but they do move kind of hand in hand. Flames refer to the symbol. A symbol which is pretty common on the web is that there's a flame next to maybe it's a forum entry or an article which just shows how popular it is. And so an orange flame would indicate that it was a popular story. And so it was almost like a symbol of success, a symbol that you connected with readers. And then the final sentence, it's basically telling them to be good at their jobs, that original ideas and information and stories like provoke conversation and thinking, like make an impact. There's no point writing stories completely like in a vacuum with nobody reading them. The whole point is that we're trying to participate in a conversation, or we're trying to instigate conversation and to provoke conversation. And then to be even more of a hustler, I mean, work hard, be dynamic, think, go out and get the story. Basically, in total, to be a good journalist, I think those are 3 essential characteristics.
Okay. And I take it you stand by those even to this day?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay. All right. Your Honor, we approach